Hello and welcome back to Sharks Happen. Today we got a few crazy stories we're going to go over as usual. One of them, a gentleman boxed with a shark in waist-deep water. Another one, a woman was swimming across the channel and she was bitten immediately, but was it a shark that bit her? And then we're going to go over just a terrible attack on a hookah diver. This one could come straight out of the movie Jaws. So stick with me, we got a great show. Okay, we started our show today over in the Catalina Channel. That is between the Catalina Islands and mainland California. The date on this is August 29th of 2013. Charlotte Brynn, she is 47 years old and she is a long distance swimmer, and she is going to swim the Catalina Channel. So it's 20 miles from Catalina Island to the mainland. She's going to swim that 20.1 miles. She starts out at 11 o'clock at night and she starts swimming. She has a guide boat with her, and she says within 45 minutes to an hour of her starting out, she ends up getting slammed in the side. She's over a mile from shore and she's in anywhere from 100 to 500 foot deep water. It probably varies, but it's very deep water. And like I said, it's 11 o'clock at night and she has like a glow stick, I believe it is, swinging from her hip as she's swimming along. And shortly after her swim began, she got hit in the right side. She said it felt, she didn't know what it was, but it felt like it had her whole right side in its mouth. And then it was quick and abrupt and it let her go. And she said she felt a stinging sensation, almost like nails on her skin. And she didn't let her support boat know, and she continued on with her swim. She swam for another, I believe it was 11 hours total in the swim, when she had to stop the swim due to surface temperature was 65 degrees and she had came down, was suffering the effects of hypothermia. So 13 hours after she had started her swim, a couple hours after the swim was done, she had found in one of her wounds a tooth fragment. And they had looked at the tooth fragment. She ended up with one puncture wound. It's on her hip, and it's one puncture wound on the top, and I believe it's 2 puncture wounds on the back, or 3 puncture wounds on the back from the teeth. The mouth seems to be pretty large, and it hit her right on the hip. She was surprised. She thought it was more lower to her buttocks, but it was right on her hip. They said that a marine biologist had looked at the tooth and confirmed it as the tooth of a leopard shark, but then now I'm seeing in at least one report that this was a bony fish tooth. And this isn't to say that the marine biologist doesn't know what he's talking about. This goes back to that whole thing where I said you can't tell what kind of shark just by looking at a shark tooth. Like they said with Megalodon, looks so much like a great white, that doesn't matter. I mean, you can't even tell bony fish to some of these, the rounder teeth. They're similar, and it's a tooth fragment. It's not the whole tooth, so it's the tip of the tooth, so it's guesswork. So it's not that I'm saying that the marine biologist is way off on this. It's probably very similar to the teeth in a leopard shark, but others are claiming that it was a bony fish that bit her. Who knows what kind? It was a pretty large mouth on it. This will go down as a questionable attack. I actually have a stack set aside. I believe I have 4 or 5 attacks right now that were the diver disappeared, or a fisherman was fishing and his body parts were found later. Some of those are in a questionable for me. 4 or 5 right now. I'll add this to it because we don't know whether it was a shark or like they say, a bony fish. Okay, now we're going to head over to Second Beach, Port St. John's, Eastern Cape Province, South Africa. The date on this, March 3rd, 2013. Fundile Nogumla, he is 39 years old, and he and his family are out at Second Beach, and he is on shore. He's on the beach with his youngest while his wife and his other kids are out swimming. And his wife and his kids are out swimming for a half hour, and then they come in. And when they get in, Fundile decides he's going to go out and he's going to swim. So he goes out, he gets into about waist deep water. They don't say what time or how far from shore, but he's in waist deep water. And he says himself, I was amongst a bunch of bathers. It's not like I was farther out than anybody or I was on the edge of this group. I was amongst 30 or so bathers. and he suddenly sees a thrashing in the water next to him. So he doesn't know what it is. He knows something's thrashing, and he says he jumped up, and it sounds like he jumped up almost out of the water. So he jumps up, and he says when he looked down, when he was coming down, he could see a nightmare. He called it his worst nightmare, a shark with its mouth open, and it sounds like it's a pretty large shark. And he comes down, and he says now he gets into a boxing match with the shark. And he's standing there, and he's shown in the picture as he's bandaged up, he's shown looking like a boxer standing there. And he says he fought him to a draw. He would punch the shark in the face. The shark would, be taking a chunk out of his arm or a chunk out of his other arm. He got bit in the chest, bit in the abdomen, but he boxed it. He says that he was screaming for help. Nobody came to help him. Second Beach did not have lifeguards at the time due to budget constraints. They only have them like in March for the whole. Well, there's one, maybe it's December. 1 month they have them the whole month, a little bit in December or in January, at the beginning of January, and then in March for a little bit, a couple weeks. So they don't have the funding to have their lifeguards, and even when they have the lifeguards, they say that they are, underprepared and under-equipped to be able to deal with these things. So not a place you want to be attacked, and a very dangerous beach. And he ends up with another one of those. We go over these all the time. These sharks seem to swim and pick out a victim in the middle of a bunch of victims, like possibilities. It picks somebody out, singles them out, and this time it went for somebody that decided to fight him off. This one reminds me of the tiger shark and the spear fisherman, that he had to fight that tiger shark off. After it bit him in the arm, he fought it off for 30 minutes because the support boat couldn't hear him yelling. I forget his name, but there wasn't much on that. That'd be an interesting interview too. These guys are something else. So another crazy story. Guy boxes a shark. We don't know what kind of shark or how big it was. I would say that it's at least 6-8 feet for the way that he ended up getting torn up. They're not small looking bandages, and to sit there and box with it, it's got to be pretty big. I would think that if you're punching a smaller 5-foot shark in the head, that thing's going to take off. But no telling, but a crazy story, an attack. We'll put it down as an attempt to predate. The thing bit him up and didn't go away, and he was sitting there punching on it. So, and Second Beach is a place where, for some reason, they turn into fatalities and disappeared bodies, or tries to consume more often than not. So, I don't know what the circumstances are with that beach, but man, they get a lot of attacks. Well, anybody that watches this show knows how many times we've gone to Second Beach and covered attacks there. So that's our story of Fundile, Nogumla. An attack, not an attempt to predate. We don't know what kind of shark. Okay, we're going to head over to Waeyang Island, and that is in South Korea. The date, May 23rd, 1981. Pak Kyong-sun, she is 27 years old, and she was out in a boat, a steamer they call it, takes 30 of these women, I believe it is, out, and they get in the water, and at the time they're in 7 feet of water, about 120 yards from shore, 7 feet deep water, and they're picking abalones, sea cucumbers. They're collecting things that they obviously need to collect. So she's in the water and she's collecting things. Now there's a witness that was nearby, Pak Kyong-sun, and she heard screaming and splashing, and she said she turned to Pak Kyong-sun's direction and saw that a large shark was ramming her, and she was lifting her head out of the water. Pak was screaming shark to everybody. Now the support boat is about 35 yards from her at the time. It hears her screams and immediately starts up the engine and makes its way over. When it gets over to her, one of the gentlemen that are down on the deck see that the shark is making a run at her head. It's about to bite her in the head, and he grabbed her by it sounds like by her suit, and dragged her back towards him, and the shark ended up just biting her hood from her suit. But then the shark was able to bite her in the waist, and now her husband actually is the one skippering this skiff that takes everybody around there, and now he is at the side of the boat, and now when the shark gets her by the waist, he takes a hook and jabs the shark in the back, actually inserting it in the shark's back, and the shark just takes his wife and goes underneath the boat and disappears with her. They never find her. She must have been consumed. This is a huge shark. They say this shark was over, I think it was 7 meters, over 7 meter shark. So if that's the case, that's over a 22, 23 foot shark. So that's a huge shark that took her. And you know, these people are in the water so close to her, they have to be in shock by being in the water with something that big, that close. I know I would be. And just tremendously horrible for her husband to go through that. But we've had these stories before where the husband's on the boat and sees the wife taken, or the wife's on the boat and sees the husband taken, dad, daughter, and it's terrible in all these situations. But Pak Kyong-sun, we're going to put her down as an attack, predation, and we're going to say this is a great white shark. I can't think of any other shark. There's no tiger that's going to be over 20 feet. And they say this was over 7 meters. So you're talking over 22 feet. That would be one of the largest sharks ever. I still think that the true 23 footer that actually was out there is the one that's in that picture. The photo of the gentleman that caught the shark, and they couldn't bring the whole thing in. It weighed so much. They cut the head off and they cut the dorsal fin off. That dorsal fin is the biggest fin I've ever seen in my life. So I think they do get to 23 feet, and it sounds like she ran into one of them. So that's our story of Pak Kyong-sun. Now we're going to head over to Goat Rock, or near Goat Rock, and that is a few miles from Jenner, California. The date is October 10th of 1993. Rosemary Johnson, she is 33 years old, and her and 3 other friends are out doing some kayaking. They're all in their own kayaks, so there's 4 kayaks out there. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. They're approaching the spot where Rodney Fox was attacked by a shark, and they're about a little less than a quarter mile from shore. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, no telling on the depth of water. And the friends are all looking at her when her kayak is hit, that the shark, with the kayak in its mouth, takes her all the way out of the water. She gets ejected from the kayak, but she lands, and it sounds like she lands on her feet, because she said she thought she landed on a rock when she hit the water. Because she hit something solid. She said, but her feet, whatever her feet landed on, it had some give to it. She thinks she landed on the shark. Her friends were all telling her to swim to them. So by the time her friends had gotten over, she had already swam back over to her kayak and got back in it. And I don't even know if she was aware that it was a shark that did this at the time, but her friend sure made sure to let her know that was a shark that did it. She gets back into her kayak, and they all decide it's best to get out of the water, which is pretty much what the shark wanted anyway. So, you know, she gets out of it with probably tooth marks and an impact point to her kayak, but no injury to her. I don't keep stats on these kayaks as I do boards. I will keep board attacks, but this is an attack on a kayak, not on a person. And a board's a little different. Sometimes it gets the person, it'll grab their legs, or grab the person in the board. I keep track of all those, just not these kayak attacks. Crazy story though, it's the one where she lands on her feet on top of the shark that knocked her out of her kayak in the first place, and had to swim to her kayak from that shark that was, I believe, swimming away from her kayak at that point. So pretty famous attack on this one. So no record of this. It's, you know, an attack, not an attempt to predate. If it was attempting to predate anything, it would be the kayak. So that's our story of Rosemary Johnson. Now we're going to head over near the KOA campground, and that is in Hatteras Island, North Carolina. The date is June 27th of 2015. John Cole is 18 years old. He and his family are visiting the beach. He and his father are in the water. It's 4 o'clock, and John has himself about 20 feet from shore. It sounds like his father's not far from him. So he's in waist deep water, 3 feet of water, probably some waves coming in, making it a little deeper here and there. But he's standing in 3 feet of water, and suddenly he's bit in the leg. I believe it's his right leg. His right calf is seized by a shark, and he screams, and he starts hitting the shark with his hands. It finally releases him. It doesn't sound like it held on to him very long, but he had to strike it to get it to let him go. His father shortly then after came out to him, grabbed him, and took him into shore. He went in and he went through his surgery. I had seen an update that they had put out a statement. He had put out a statement just to respect his privacy when he was doing his recovering. So not really an update on the attack or what had happened. I couldn't find anything where he actually talks about the attack himself. At least I didn't find it when I was looking through it. So they said this was an 8-foot bull shark. It's just crazy that these sharks can get an 8-foot shark gets right up on you and is biting you, but you didn't see it coming in 3 feet of water. One of those crazy things about how the sharks can just sneak up on a person. So we're going to put this down as an attack, not an attempt to predate by an 8-foot bull shark. Okay, now we're going to finish out our unprovoked attacks over off of Punta Negra, and that is in Chile. The date, January 5th of 1980. Jose Miranda, he is out doing some hookah diving with the air hose coming to you. He did his first dive. His boat was about 20 yards from shore, and he had gone out and did his dive, speared a fish, collected some locos, and went to the top of the water. And then he went over to a second dive spot, which is near a seal haul out area, about 120 yards from the seal haul out area. It sounds like his boat came over to him. It's a 7-meter boat. It came over to him, and he was just going to do his second dive. So he left the boat, and he goes about 5 to 6 yards from the boat, and then he starts descending on a shallow angle. So he's descending himself. The hose is going out forward when shortly after he disappeared from the top of the water, the hose stopped moving and no bubbles were coming to the top of the water. A couple strange things. Now the tank accumulator on the boat started building up pressure, and this pressure was released with, it sounds like an explosion of air and blood mixed, and it just filled the water. It just exploded out of this thing. So the shark must have had the equipment in its mouth, and it built up the pressure till it forced itself out of the shark, and we'll get into that in a second. But shortly after, this water with blood and air comes out and releases itself. The gentleman on the boat sees the back of a huge shark, and the head and the back, but not the dorsal fin, and it sees that it has the victim. He's headless now, so his head and his left arm are gone, and it took his head off right about at the shoulder length. It wasn't like up on the neck, right at the shoulder, and it just goes straight across, and the arm is just completely gone. So it bit his head and his arm off, and now it's got his body, and it's hanging there by his suit. So it sounds like the shark has the suit in its mouth, and the body's hanging there, and it lets go of the body. Now the body's floating there, and now the shark is doing laps around the body. Now other boats have heard this commotion, and they're coming over. So there's multiple boats now over in this area, and the shark is sitting there, and it's taking bites on the body as it's swimming around it. They're starting their engines, trying to get it to scare it away. They thought they had succeeded when the shark went about 20 yards away, and they're trying to get the body up onto the boat. Well, that shark came at that boat with its mouth open at the top of the water and slammed into the boat. Now the boat driver was able to swing around, so he didn't take the full brunt of that. But now the shark turned sideways and was smacking the boat with his head. And they said the tip of his head was at the front of the boat and its tail was at the back of the boat, and this was a 7-meter boat. This was a 7-meter shark, not the other one. The other one was over 6 meters, so it's about a 20-footer. This one, they say, was a 23-foot shark, and they had lined it up with the side of the boat as it was smacking on this boat, mad that it couldn't get to that body. And finally, the shark had gone away and left them be. They took the body in. The autopsy showed that, yes, he was decapitated, but he also had slashes to his body, to his torso, front and back, from that shark making runs at him as it was swimming around him in circles. Go back to the beginning of that story. If that pressure hadn't built up in that shark's mouth the way that it did and blown out, I don't think that they would have ever known what happened for sure. We've gone over some of these attacks. The one woman followed the line and swam down and saw her dad being attacked as it was happening. And I had a lot of times, the Hirata was on the hookah line when he was down there, the Japanese guy. He was ripped out of his suit with the leg turned inside out. It ripped him out with such force. So I'm not sure that they would have known for sure what happened had that buildup in that tank not happened and that pressure blew that out. It probably startled the shark and kept him from doing what he was doing. He already consumed part of the body, and he was making the runs, and he was awful angry at what had happened. So I'm going to put this down as an attack, an attempt to predate They said that it was a shark that was 7 meters, so we're talking a 22-foot great white shark. That's going to get this one, and we'll get on to the end of the show. Okay, we're going to get to the end of the show. What were you thinking before that? I just wanted to say that the stores are both open internationally if you wanted to buy something. Sharks Happen 2, TOO. .etsy.com. If you type that into a browser and you hit, enter, that'll take you right to my store. So the whole store will be there. It's the way that I get to my stores. I'll put a link on the site pretty soon. I'll put one on the community board and one on my website. I should have done that already. But the other store that ships only to U.S. territories, that's sharkshappen.com. That's the website. That's also where you can get for free. You can go on there and you can scroll down and you can download yourself the spreadsheets on the attacks. I just updated last week up to 360 large shark attacks that we have covered. So you can go ahead and get that for yourself, and those are both available. Now we're going to finish the show off. This was in 1892, I do believe it, over in the Badu Islands, which is in the Torres Straits. There was Mr. A. Rotoman, and he was what they call a dress diver, and he was going down there diving, and he had himself his knife. It sounds like the shark was already here, and this reminds me, and it's like, what are you thinking? But reminds me of like, I don't know which book it was, if it was like Robinson Crusoe or one of them kind of books where, the guy, I remember a book back in the day, like you would read in school, where the kid is sitting there and the shark is coming at him, and he ducks below the shark and slices his belly wide open and kills the shark. It sounds like what this Mr. A. Rotoman was going to do back in 1892. Sounds like he saw this large shark, and very large shark. There's a huge shark down there in the water, and he's going to go and it says he molested it with a knife. So I think he was going to do that thing where you try to dive underneath it and slice its belly open. He molested the shark with a knife, they said, first, and then the shark bit him in half. So he did not survive. I don't know what he was thinking, but those books, I doubt that you can outmaneuver a shark to go from their head down to their belly and slice them like that. I would think that it can happen, but it's more luck if it's going to happen. So Mr. A. Rotoman, what were you thinking? I mean, it sounds like if it can bite you in half, it's over 12 feet. I mean, I don't think a 10-foot shark can bite a person in half. I think it has to be a 12-footer, and it has to be a bull, a tiger, or a great white. Otherwise, it isn't going to be able to do it. That's our show for today. That's our What You've Been Thinking. I hope you'll join me for the next show. I'm going to be back in probably about 4 days. But until then, remember, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.